Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Walton and welcome to Quilt Stories. Today I'm talking to my very good friend Susan Brubaker Knapp, who I've known for many, many years, and our paths cross all the time when I was able to travel, which has been a long time since then, but let's hope that it'll happen again soon. Hi Susan.
Hey, how are you, Lisa?
I'm doing very, very well, and it's good to see you finally. It's been about a year or something, I think, since we've seen you. No, two
It was
years.
in Houston, 2019, right before things got crazy, I think. We had a wonderful Mexican dinner together.
We did. I remember that one. Yes, one or too many margaritas. You can never have too many margaritas. Okay, we're going to talk about a quilt today that has quite a serious inspiration. So I'm just going to switch over to our screen sharing. It's a beautiful, beautiful quilt, but I'm going to ask Susan to tell us the inspiration for it.
This quilt is called I'll Fly Away, and I made it about a year and a half ago, right when the United States was going through, and I guess we still are, but when we were experiencing a lot of turmoil over racial justice in this country. And George Floyd had just been killed. This is a shot from my local television station. Some of the Confederate statues were being taken down. This is in Raleigh, which is the closest big town to where I live, where there were protests and they were removing some of these statues. And there was just a lot of turmoil in our country. And it was very upsetting to me. I wanted to make a piece about justice and about equality and freedom and liberation. And I started working on a piece called I'll Fly Away, and it features birds, crows, flying. And I had actually studied in college. I had to do an undergraduate thesis, and I did it on partly on the work of Toni Morrison, who is a very important, influential writer. She was a Pulitzer Prize winning author of the book called Beloved. And one of her books that I really love uses flight imagery. There are old stories from enslaved people in the United States that they brought with them from Africa, that a lot of people, they believed that they could fly away from their bondage and from their pain. And so I used this crow imagery in my piece to show that. On the back of the piece, I wrote a lot of names of people who, Black people and people of color, who have been killed from police brutality in the United States over decades.
So here is the outline of the crows that you used.
Yes, and I oftentimes start this way with just a simple line drawing. And sometimes when I work from my own photos, I trace. So that's what I did here. I had this image of a bird in flight, a crow, and I traced it, and then I pulled it into Photoshop and then into a page layout program so that I could manipulate the scale and the size of the birds and create the composition. So that's actually just one image changed somewhat and tilted and flipped and sized to get the composition. So one of my primary techniques is whole cloth painting, which means I start with white fabric and I paint the entire surface before I start to stitch or quilt. And this shot shows some of the paints that I use. Primarily, I use Pro Chemical and dye paint, which is an acrylic textile paint. So it's an acrylic paint mixed with an extender or a material that allows it to bond with the fabric and be permanent on fabric. I really like transparent paints rather than opaque paints because I feel like transparent paints allow me to create more realism and give my work more depth than using opaque or more flat paints.
And one or two paintbrushes.
Yes, I have struggled to find good paintbrushes to paint on fabric because I really like very stiff and very short bristles. So that is what gives me control when I paint on fabric, when I'm painting for realism. And this is a piece that I just finished. It's pitcher plants. I had a lot of detail to it. I use paintbrushes of all different types now. Some of these are my old brushes. You can see I've got them patched together with masking tape, and some of them are newer, but usually I tell my students, look for bristles that are really stiff and short when you're trying to find something to work on fabric.
So it looks to me like you're tracing from an image below. Is that correct?
I am. So oftentimes I start with my own photos and I trace them. I enlarge that traced drawing to the size that my finished piece is going to be. And I put that under the fabric. And I almost always use prepared for dyeing fabric. I love the Pimatex by Robert Kaufman because it's very sheer and it's very tightly woven. So that means that I can see my pattern through the fabric and I can work just from there. Sometimes I do go back over with a pencil and trace it onto my fabric. Other times I'm able to just see it really well through the fabric and I can just go ahead and paint.
So here we've got you working on the other quilt, the picture plant quilt. So you're
Right.
color mixing, and so you've decanted your Pro Chem paints into squirt bottles with the extender. Does that make it runnier or?
I don't add the extender in the bottles. I add the extender when I mix the paints in the palette. So I use the extender partly to keep the paint really fluid. It helps me get those very fine lines. If you add water, these paints will bleed out. They'll bleed into the fabric. So a little bit of base extender and a little bit of water means that I can make very fine lines. This shows the palette totally messy. I think this was at the end of painting one of those pitcher plants. So it was really a mess, but I use a palette like this that has a snap-on lid because it keeps my paints dry, because sometimes I'm working for days or even weeks on a piece. You know, my life gets busy and I have to walk away from it for a couple of days. And with this snap-on lid that goes on this palette, I can put it in my refrigerator. Now, you never want to freeze paints, but putting them in the refrigerator helps to keep them still fluid. And then I can pull them out even weeks later and still use the paints.
Okay, that's a very good tip.
It is,
Ah,
it's important. And I also, for this piece, I used stencils. So when I was creating this piece, I wanted to basically paint the whole surface and then mask out the area around the birds, the sky, and allow the more vibrant colors that I had painted on the fabric to show through. And so I painted very bright pinks, purples, blues over the whole surface very quickly. And I use my hands. I am like a finger painter sometimes. I smear it on and blend with my hands. And I got all of those colors kind of blended in. And then I use stencils like these and a stencil brush. And I put the stencils on top of the piece and I just go to town. And I was very random. I don't really take too much care with it. I'm trying to create overall texture and movement and interest on the piece. So after that, after I finished stenciling, then I masked out those birds and I painted around them.
so this is you doing that. You look very in the moment there.
I am, and that's a staged picture because I would never paint in my good clothes and my beautiful
I
scarf.
thought you were very
Um,
dressed up.
I'm usually in grungy clothes and a big work apron, but I had my daughter take a picture of me with this piece because these are my colors. I just love blue, but it does show me masking out. You can see that little fine white line around the bird, which is a chalk
Mhm.
pencil that I've drawn, the outline of the birds. I actually cut them out of the paper and then put them down on top of the piece of fabric that I had painted and stenciled and traced around them with a chalk pencil. And then I went back with a mixture of white paint and base extender and water. And I painted that cloudy looking white color in the background around the birds. So it
Okay.
masks out some of what I had painted.
I see. Yes, it's clearer there. Definitely.
Right. So here you can see one of them, just the chalk line around the wings, and then the other ones are in progress. And I had started masking them out and I built it up little bit by little bit. So I wanted to get the sense of the birds first, and the sense that they were moving through the air and the light behind them, to make them look kind of magical and powerful. So after that, I went back and added more and more of the white to build it up and make that background whiter and allow the birds to be more saturated in color.
I'm looking at the stencil designs, and a lot of them seem to be artist seller stencils. which I really love as well.
Yeah, I think they are. And that one with the handwriting on it, there's actually letters in it. And I chose that one particularly for the birds because I wanted it to suggest all the names of all the people who had been killed.
Right, that's very clever.
Mhm.
Oh, your helper.
Yes, we of course we have to have a picture of the studio assistant here. This is my cat Wicked, and she is always in the middle of everything. She got her paws in paint earlier this week for the first time by walking across one of my pieces.
Oh,
But
good.
she's always here to check things out. Good companion.
Oh, one or two Beninas. Nice to see.
Yes, I have two, and I have a 770 quilters edition, and I actually have three because I have the Virtuoso 153, my very first machine, which I got almost 20 years ago. I got it the year I turned 40. So yeah, it's 18 years old. And then I also have my mother's 440, which is the, I think, Aurora 440. And it's really nice because when one's not, if one's having issues and I need to take it into the shop, then I've always got others, which is fabulous.
Yes,
So
I have two Beninas as well. They're just they're great workhorses, aren't they? They're
they
excellent.
are, yes. And so this shot shows me quilting, and you can see how much quilting I did around all of the stencils. I really spent a lot of time. I love the combination of paint and stitch together.
And it looks to be a variegated thread.
Yes, I used mostly 40 weight variegated. I think a lot of these are YLI. Some of them are Aurifil. Aurifil, I have a huge number of the 50 weight, which I really love. And I actually do quilt with them as well. But in this case, I think, this was during COVID and I wasn't going out to shop for thread. So I used a lot of what I already had. And it's a combination of a bunch of different threads.
I've heard that a lot from quilters in that COVID has been really good for making them reduce their stash a lot because they couldn't go out for new.
I think I went through more thread than I did fabric because I'm doing so much whole cloth painting right now. So I had bolts of the prepared for dyeing fabric, but I didn't go through very much of my other fabric stash, unfortunately, because I've got a lot.
Okay, so we've just got, oh, that's a lovely shot of the close-up of the quilting.
Yes. And I just love all that detail. If you look really closely, you'll probably see some cat hair too.
Yes, I'm also covered in cat hair. These are great detail shots.
Yeah, I enjoy doing pebbles. I did a lot of them, and I just love these colors too. These are my happy colors.
I'm very impressed you went around all the stencil lettering because there's a lot of stitching there. But you sort of get into a Zen zone, don't you? And just think, really, just
I
follow it.
love free motion quilting. I really love to do it, and it does make me really relaxed. So during COVID, it was a great thing to do. I can say that when I was first learning free motion quilting, it was very nerve-wracking, but now I get to a place where it is almost meditative for me. And I tell my students that, and they don't believe me. But as you do it and you get better at it, it frees your mind because you can't think of anything else. You have
Mm.
to focus. So it eliminates all your worries out of your brain because you are thinking about making those stitches right.
I'm just looking very closely at your stitching. You're not doing a lot of stops and starts, are you?
No, I hate starting and stopping. So I do almost anything to avoid that. In fact, I think about that while I'm designing a quilt, about whether I can get away with it. And if I have to do a lot of starts and stops, it better be something that I really love and I'm willing to take that time because, yeah, almost everything I do, I try to start and stop as little as possible. I love the way that the stencils come through in some places, and I kind of played with that. In certain areas, I wanted those darker, more saturated colors to come forward and pop out. In other places, I rubbed that white mixed with base extender and a little bit of water over it to push it back and make it whiter.
A lot of quilting, Susan.
It is, but that's what makes it. That's what I think makes this piece.
Definitely.
Here, this is my studio. It's kind of crazy. Now, we moved about a year and a half ago in December, right before COVID hit, a couple months later. And my studio is a mishmash of lots of different pieces of old furniture. And but I have these huge, nice, big windows that look out into the trees, which I love. And here you can see the piece right before I got ready to face it. So it's finished. The cat's giving her final approval. And then I do a facing technique. I really like facings on art quilts because I feel like they look more like a piece of art and a little bit less like a quilt if they don't have a binding on them.
Do you sign your quilts on the front at all?
I don't. I have not done that. And I think it's partly because I come from a traditional quilting background rather than an art background. But I also know that if I'm going to submit them to an exhibition and they're going to be judged, then I'd have to mask that out somehow as well. So I always sign them and label them on the back, but I don't sign on the front.
A movement towards signing on the front and just masking it out for judging of things. But yeah, it's interesting because it is art.
Yeah.
Painters would no more sign on the back and not the front. So why don't we? But it's just that traditional thought.
I'll tell you, I'll start doing that when the judges stop looking at the back of my quilts. Because I don't think judges should look at the back of art quilts either. They wouldn't look at the back of a painting.
No, exactly. So here we have the finished piece, which is just beautiful.
So this is the finished piece. And on the back of the piece, I have a list that I compiled or that I took that had been compiled by Renee Atter. I'm not sure whether I'm saying her name correctly, but she has researched and compiled a list of unarmed people of color who were killed by police. I didn't do the whole list. I did a lot of it, and I did a lot of the names from recent years that I recognized. So I wanted it to be a tribute to them.
And this book by Carolyn Mazumi, this quilt is in the book?
It's in the book. There was an exhibition that was organized by Carolyn and up in Minneapolis. It was actually several different exhibitions at several different venues and fabulous, interesting, educational pieces and very powerful exhibition. I was so honored to be in it. And there is this catalog. It's a big, thick catalog. And it's available through the Textile Center in Minneapolis. This is the pages inside showing my piece. And the artist statements are really interesting. They allowed us a good amount of space for them, which I love, because if you're reading about pieces that have deep meaning, and all of these do, a lot of them were highly personal. So you can really read about the meaning of the piece and what the artist thought.
The information on getting this catalog is down below in the description box. So check it out, and hopefully you might be interested in purchasing that as well. You've got a Susan Shy piece behind you. I love her work, and I've actually done one of my quilt stories with her, and I'll put the link up for everyone to watch. Her technique is just astounding. I'm always amazed at what she's able to achieve in one quilt. And so what's this quilt about?
I love Susan Shy's work too. She is one of my quilting heroes, partly because so much of her comes through in her work. And so she feels so free to convey what she's thinking about things. This shows the Fearless Girl. The Fearless Girl statue was installed in Wall Street, and she's wearing her pussy hat. But the statue was set up to show this little feminist girl and she was facing down the bull statue that's in Wall Street in New York City.
At the moment, what are you doing? I don't think you're teaching much at the moment, are you?
No, I had intended to take a year or two kind of off from most teaching before COVID. And I struggled a little bit at the beginning. I didn't do much work. I was kind of in hibernation, but I've been working most recently on a series of botanical subjects. So I'm very interested in a lot of things I see around me in my new hometown of Chapel Hill. And we have a fabulous botanical garden. So, you know me, I always am taking pictures of plants. I do that beauty on my morning walk thing that I show on social media. And I'm very interested in botany. If I had had a brain for science, I might have gone into botany. But the botanical garden has a gallery, and there is a proposal due for exhibitions. So I've never had a solo show anywhere. So I've been working like crazy trying to produce some additional pieces on botanical subjects so that I can do a proposal to the garden.
Great, excellent. And your Quilting Arts TV that you're the host of, how's that going?
It's great. I didn't do the last taping. Vivica Hansen Denegre, the editor of Quilting Arts Magazine, was the host for series 2800 because I have some health issues and I didn't feel that I could go and still be safe. And my daughter actually caught COVID right before I would have gone to the taping. So it was a really good thing that I didn't go. She's college aged, and a lot of the kids had it. She was very careful, but still got it in last August, long time ago. So it was probably good that I didn't go, but I'm hoping and planning to be back the next time we tape. Right now, we're not sure exactly when that's going to be. We're kind of waiting to feel things out and see when it's good to do it again.
Yes, it's been, I think, 2 years since I was on it, and it was such fun. It was just a really fun time, even though it was a blizzard. I've never been in a blizzard before, but it was interesting. Okay.
That's what made it even more fun, just to see you in the blizzard.
Yes, we don't have much snow in Australia, and certainly I don't think, I've never been in a blizzard before. You have a book which is available as print on demand, I believe, now.
That's right. It's called Point Click Quilt, and it's basically about my process of taking a photo and then tracing from the photo to create your own pattern for art quilt. And it's mostly about my fusible applique technique. There's a little bit of whole cloth painting in it as well. And yeah, it's available as print on demand through C&T Publishing. I also have a blog post where I answer all those questions I get on social media constantly about whole cloth painting. And I have a quilting arts workshop that's available as a digital download through quiltingdaily.com. That's called Dynamic Quilt Design, and it is a video teaching my basic painting technique.
Great. All that information is down in the description box below. So please check that out as well as all of Susan's social media links and website, etc. Now, you're doing a podcast at the moment.
I am. We started that, about a year ago. And so this is the Quilting Arts podcast, and I co-host it with Vivica. And it has been so much fun, really, really interesting and fun to do.
Great. Susan has also done a short little video where she goes into more detail about the inspiration behind this beautiful quilt, I'll Fly Away. And just as a hint, she actually sings in it. So the link is below, so please check that out. I hope that you've enjoyed finding out more about Susan's technique. I love it. I'm still a bit gobsmacked by all the quilting, but it's just beautiful. So if you are interested in seeing more of these types of videos, please click the subscribe button below, and that would be really good, because then YouTube will bring it up on people's feeds, and then more people will see and learn more about quilting, which is always going to be a great thing. So it's been absolutely delightful to see you again. I hope we get to see each other again soon, one day when COVID is all done and dusted, but it might be a little while to go yet.
We will. Well, this is the next best thing, is being able to see each other across the ocean and the time zones. And I will owe you a margarita the next time I see you, okay?
Sounds great. Okay, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.